So I think the current form of society is not really what we're trying to manifest. And part of that is that we're stripped of our knowledge of who we are, and our heritage, our history is very muddled. There's this talk about resets, and I think there's some validity to that. In one way or another, we've lost contact with who we really are and where we're really from. And so, therefore, we don't really know the tools of manifestation, those being intentions, symbols, and rituals. And I think that's being used against us now. So in modern society, we have this notion that magic is just Disney and make-believe. Although that's part of it, that's not really the full story. And I think because of that, we don't know how to manifest stuff. And so that's a big talk. If you go around and talk to people at these conferences, Brother Brian was talking about that a little bit. James, Brad Olson talking about, living in a society with total peace where we all get along. That doesn't seem to be a very easy thing to do. But part of that is because we don't understand really what manifesting a desired outcome means and the tools that we use, and that's what magic is. And so my talk today is going to revolve around public relations. Who knows what public relations is? Anyone? Raise their hand. Okay, right. Well, there's a few people. So public relations really is the manipulation of words, terms, and symbols, or stories, which is maybe the oldest form of public relations, narratives, which steer a community or a society to some desired end by some group of people, or some person, a leader, a chief, a shaman, a president, whatever. And I think by the end of this talk today, you're going to see that public relations is a modern form of occult magic. It's being used against us to create a society that's not really for us. It's for them, and who the them are is a whole nother discussion. But I think, there we go.
Great job, Andy.
Well, there's something there. There's something there. That's not really what's on my computer, but that's something. So.
Do you want them to be mirrored to where they show the same thing?
So yeah, well, because I want to show my slideshow, right? So let me open it back up again. Let me shut this down. It's right here. Lectures. Right there. That's incredible. So I usually just plug it in and it works. But that's why we got tech guys, people, right? Let's hear from Michael and Eddie, right? God bless the tech people. They're like attorneys, and then until you realize what attorneys really are, and then you're like, oh shit. So anyway, there's my first two books, Song in Your Heart, Story of the Search for Lost Notes, about the Roots Reggae Rastas and what the reggae guys are really doing. They're part of this kind of indigenous kind of movement to forgive stuff that's happened in the past, at least for the time being. And let's move forward into the future because we got some trials and tribulations coming around. A UFO Hunter's Guide, as Rhonda spoke about. There's some DVDs up there. The DVD in the middle there is an American law primer, and one of my little specialties is studying law outside of being an attorney. So when you hire an attorney, you're a ward of the court, and if you look up a ward of the court in Black's Law Dictionary, it's not good. So you want to be able to represent yourself. Again, you want to be empowered. You want to manifest your own desired outcomes. You don't want to rely on other people unless you can really trust them. This is the new book right here, Agents of Ascension, UFO PR. And it's basically about what we're going to see here is that there's a hierarchy of beings. So from spirits to ascended masters to some alien factions to some groups on Earth to some groups within the Earth are all working together in a unified way to try to nudge humanity towards ascension without violating our free will. Now, opposing that is another hierarchy of beings of the same rankings, and they're trying to disrupt that process and turn us into, we're like the cattle for them. They can feed off us, and this is a whole nother talk I call the magic of society. I delved into it a little bit last year, but ever increasing taxes, fines, and fees, engineered inflation, things like mortgages. It's sucking our spiritual energy out of us in the form of Federal Reserve notes. And society itself is a big, giant, magical ritual. I first learned that from one of my teachers, Jordan Maxwell. But today we're going to be talking about that PR campaign. I'm going to show you the nuts and bolts, what led me to that theory, and I'm going to talk about one of the chapters in that book. It's the Shaver Mystery. Have you guys ever heard of the Shaver Mystery? No one's ever heard of the shaving. You're going to love this, all right? So we'll get to that in just a few minutes. We're going to delve into a little bit of public relations first. But at the end, I'm going to try to answer these three questions. Was Richard Shaver lying about his work, or was it really nonfiction, even though it was written in a fiction magazine, Amazing Stories, back in the 1940s and 40s and early and up to 50? Was Shaver's fascinating fiction a vehicle for a public relations campaign? I believe so. We're going to see evidence to support that. And then we're going to answer that question, who are the agents of ascension? So, I got some really cool people to endorse this book, one of which is a friend of the show, Dr. Richard Boylan. Anyone familiar with Dr. Richard Boylan? He was buddies with your dad, Nikki, and a legend in his own right. So I was really honored to have him there. Brooks Agnew also endorsed it too. Very, very pleased with that. Here's my quick outline of what we're going to talk about. We're going to have to breeze through a couple of these things because we're short on time. And I'm going to go into what PR is a little bit. I'm going to talk about my time briefly with the ambassador to Telos. You guys know what Telos is? No. The supposed city beneath Mount Shasta, full of ascended masters. And I got an assignment from UFO magazine to go up there, and that's what kind of kicked this whole puppy off with me going down this avenue. We're going to talk about the formal evidence of the formal PR campaign. I'm going to introduce the Shaver mystery, and then I'm going to introduce an experiment to try to show that Richard Shaver was not a crackpot. Incidentally, his wife had him committed to an insane asylum for 2 weeks. And I don't know about you guys, but I've been in some relationships where I know the woman was saying I should be in the loony bin, right? And I know I've accused a few girlfriends of that too, so I kind of give them a little pass on that one. But anyway, so let's start with public relations. It's playing games. Okay. So this little friendly guy here, which is coming back right now, is Edward L. Bernays. Do you guys know who Edward L. Bernays is?
No.
Okay. Well, in between blips, that's Edward L. Bernays right here on the left. He's known as the father of public relations. He was hired by elites. Did you catch this? Okay. He's hired by elites back in the early 1900s because he was a master of propaganda. So up until Edward L. Bernays, the word was propaganda, but it was associated with brutality and death and violence and starvation, as is evidenced in the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, or Mao's China, Pol Pot, or Hitler, are all great examples of masters of propaganda. So E.L. Bernays comes along, and they realize the power of propaganda. Thank you. And so what E.L. Bernays does in his genius is he repackages it using propaganda to rename it public relations, so it's more publicly acceptable. Right? And so that's what we have today. Okay, you just yank me. You got your hook, right? Just whenever you're ready. So E.L. Bernays, Ivy Lee are two big figures, but E.L. Bernays is the guy that I'm focusing on here. It's blipping out again, not sure why. Maybe it's my energy, I don't know.
It's the laptop. You don't have the drivers installed for the GPU, so.
Okay, so it's going to blip like that? Yeah. Okay. So on the right, you see a formal public relations campaign. There's the adaptation phase, the strategy phase, and the evaluation phase. We're going to be breaking that down here shortly. Here is the definition of public relations. This is straight from my college textbook. I went to Chico State University. E.L. Bernays came to visit us in 1991, and I got to stand in line at Sylvester's Cafe and shake this gentleman's hand. They portrayed him as a hero. From one standpoint, you can see where he maybe was good for the war effort through World Wars I and II. But since then, his work and even his own thinking, as we'll see from some quotes here soon, has kind of gotten twisted into, that old adage, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So when you understand how to manipulate people, you realize, from this viewpoint, people are stupid and they need to have their decisions made for them. Okay, so this is the hero that they were teaching me about in college. So here's the definition. I don't know if you can see this, but there's some italics in there that I added to this definition. So I'll read it here. The management of an organization's performance in relation to the perceptions of the target publics, that's the people they're directing their messages to, in order to nurture mutually beneficial, or as I say, one-sided relations between all the parties while being ethically responsible for its actions, or as I say, faking that they're being ethically responsible for its actions, because that's what's really going on today, and whether or not all parties are aware of the relations. So public relations is happening to us, and we don't really even know it. We don't even really realize it. but it's supposed to be one of these ethical things where it's all supposed to be above board. Well, sounds good on paper, right? Really quickly, this is the Orion newspaper from my alma mater, Chico State, and that's just a couple articles showing E.L. Bernays showing up in 91. Incidentally, my buddy's mom was his secretary. So it's just kind of weird that I'm doing this lecture now, as I've actually got to meet the guy. Can you guys read that from up here, from back there? No, a little small still? Okay. There's 4 really just telling quotes. I'm going to read you a couple of them so we can move on. The second one down, there are invisible rulers who control the destinies of millions. It is not generally realized to what extent the words and actions of our most influential public men are dictated by shrewd persons operating behind the scenes. Because these are the ones creating the narratives that are controlling our society. They're attempting to steer us to build a society for someone else, and it's a society that's not conducive to us. I mean, you see the chemtrails in the sky, our food and water's poisoned, we have constant wars, the laws are ever more encroaching. A friend of mine called it tiptoe tyranny, which is just slowly taking our rights away bit by bit. That's a whole nother lecture. Let's go down to the bottom one. If we understand the mechanism and motives of the group mind, it is now possible to control and regiment the masses according to our own will without them knowing it. So these are the leaders of our society. These are the leaders that we're supposedly placing in power. We're voting them, supposedly, voting them in, giving them the power to hold the reins of our society and steer our ship through the future. And this is the thinking that they're relying upon. We're not manifesting the society that we think we are, and we need to make some changes. Conferences like this, people like you coming here, I think we're the spearhead to that. This is a beautiful lady, Diane Robbins. She is known as the ambassador to Telos. I saw this ad in UFO Magazine when I used to write for UFO Magazine, and I asked my editor, Nancy Burns, what's going on with this ad? I keep seeing it, and it just kind of strikes a nerve with me, right? And she goes, oh my God, Diane Robbins is one of our best advertisers. We've been needing someone to go up and get this story. So that's how I got the story to go up to Shasta and talk to Diane Robbins. Now, at that time, I really didn't understand channeling. I was really pretty skeptical. I have a little bit different view of it now. My big thing with channeling is you don't really know who the being is. No matter what they sell you, there's no way to really corroborate what the being is. And, I've talked to different channelers, and they say, well, you can feel it in your heart. Well, okay, I'm not going to deny that from anyone, but I also know and recognize and acknowledge that we have the technology to make a person feel any way someone wants it to. It's called electronic warfare. You guys familiar with Sabrina Wallace? Any of you guys? Look up Sabrina Wallace, man. So they're hacking our biosphere, and they've been doing it for over 100 years. And they're turning us into data routers, right? So just go look that up. That's a whole nother article or lecture. So I'm boning up to go talk to Diane Robbins, and here's some of the stuff that I'm looking at. So there's newspaper articles all from the early 1900s, maybe 1890s, talking about giants and UFOs and other phenomena. This particular one that I have shown here from the Black Bear Gazette, 1937, shows a Sphinx rock. So there's a really curious rock formation in Mount Shasta that looks like the Sphinx. And if you've ever been to Mount Shasta, you know that place is full of all kinds of occult phenomena, and it's just a mishmash of all kinds of things, and I love it up there. It's one of my favorite places. You got the lenticular clouds that are associated with Mount Shasta. Ascended master people say those are alien ships. There's a rendition of a hollow earth, and if you study the hollow earth stuff, aliens and high technology and these kinds of things are all associated with that. The little guy on the left up here is supposedly a Lemurian. So like Brad was talking about Chaco Canyon maybe being part of Lemurians, or the ancient Pueblos being descendants of the Lemurians. Mount Shasta is associated with that too. And then this idea, that little center circle there with the black, and all the stuff inside it, that's a symbolically representative of how the universe is within the earth. It's not out there, it's inside. Just like it's a metaphor for our bodies. That the truth, the universe is inside us, it's not external. And that's a theme that it took me a long time to wrap my head around, but it applies big time in the big spiritual picture. So there's Adama. He's supposedly the high priest of Telos. These are some of Diane Robbins' books. So Diane Robbins, for those that don't know, she supposedly channeled this gentleman, and he was relaying to her the problems that humanity has and why it can't advance, why it's having trouble with ascension, between our warring and our corrupt view of sex, crime on all different levels, polluting our own environment, kind of a thing. So if you guys are interested, check out Diane Robbins' books. They're loaded with wisdom, and it's supposedly wisdom from these higher beings, in this case, ascended masters. And the theory is that they're trying to wake us up to not only our own power, but to their awareness of them being there. We're supposedly relatives of theirs. And the idea is that at some point when we're ready, when they can handle our coarse vibrations, they're going to come to the surface and join with us, and we're all going to ascend together. So that was a really interesting concept for me at that time. This is Mount Shasta. That's Ascension Rock here on the left. That's supposedly about 1.2 miles above Telos. There's me hanging out with Diane Robbins at Ascension Rock, and a good buddy of mine caught a picture of the sun rays coming down right as I'm looking up. It's kind of a cool picture. And then that's my first interview with Diane Robbins right there, and her Ascended Master student friend Heidi Stadler. And during that interview, back then I used to smoke a lot of pot, right? I'm pretty sober now. But back then, we just smoked a fresh, joint as we got there, and showed up for the interview, and I'm hanging out, and all of a sudden my eyes start turning green, and I'm rubbing my eyes, and I'm thinking, oh great, I smoked too much, right? And she goes, what's the matter? And I go, well, I see all this green flooding in the room. She goes, oh, don't worry about that. That's just the trees coming in to like check us out. So she wrote a book called Tree Talk, where she's channeling the tree stuff, and the trees are saying, this is what's wrong with you guys, wake up, kind of thing. It's a pretty cool book. So as I'm doing my research, I start coming across patterns that are in all the stories from throughout time, from around the world. It's like they're not connected, so why are all these themes coming through? That's what starts going through my head. I'm a public relations major, and I'm thinking, what is it that repeats over and over and over again? And I'm thinking, oh, it's advertising. Advertising repeats until it like hits your subconscious, and the next thing you know, you're buying McDonald's and you don't know why. And it doesn't work on strong minds, but it works on a lot of the weak minds, right? The masses go for this stuff. But here's some of the themes that I was uncovering. Giants, constantly in all kinds of forms, or throughout Hollow Earth and Inner Earth stories, underground bases. High technology, UFOs, advanced culture. I realized too, from a public relations standpoint, that the Inner Earth people would be the gatekeepers of their own info. That's why the information has been consistent throughout time. This is before our government was in there and could get their grubby little hands in there to try to change stuff. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind. I'm studying UFOs, and it's like, God, everything the government touches is a lie, basically. Because they're on this other hierarchy trying to disrupt ascension. They've been bought and paid for. That's a whole nother lecture. Lots of stuff's coming out by the Zionists now. That's ancient stuff, ancient magic stuff. But the last one there, witting and unwitting PR agents for their Inner Earth people. So as I'm studying this stuff and talking about it, as I'm talking about it right now, I'm relaying information that has to do with the PR campaign that's leading towards ascension. That's what all of us really are doing right now, is we are educating ourselves, enlightening ourselves, working on ourselves, trying to shed our negative baggage, capture all of our light so that we can move forward and then help other people, right? This is what Ascended Masters do. This is what ascension is all about. Eventually, we're all going to get there, supposedly, right? So, but as I realized that, I became a witting agent, because I realized, oh, this is what's going on now. I'm part of this campaign because now I'm promoting these same ideas in lectures like this and in conversations I have all over the place. I went to Chico State University, and I'd get a couple beers in me, and man, they couldn't shut me up, right? And people were like, come on, Lueder, just knock it off. You're disrupting my programming. So after dealing with Diane Robbins, we did 4 or 5 interviews, and this picture began to form. I wrote this article for Phenomena Magazine. You can see the title down here. They gave me some cover love there. I'm a PR agent for the Inner Earth people and other fascinating revelations. That is in March of 2013. If any of you are interested, phenomenamagazine.co.uk is the website. They have a vast archive there. And that's what kind of kicked this whole thing off, right? So as I started to ruminate about these things after the article, I started to build this graph here. And this is, I like to use the handwritten one because it just looks like I really got into it, But on the left, you see 16 different Hollow Earth or underground base stories. And across the top are 16 different traits. And look at all the shared traits that these stories have with each other. And it's incredible. Almost all of them talk about giants. Almost all of them talk about UFOs. Other high tech is like all of them. When you go across this way, out of the 16 possible categories, it's the Shaver mystery that has 15 of the 16. The last column, you probably can't read it, but it's magic. I could probably check that box too, but Shaver doesn't actually talk about that. But as we'll see, they have their own language, and when you understand what language is and what words and terms are, words, symbols, and symbols themselves, letters, started out as magical symbols. That's where language started, and each letter represented a different thing, and then you put 4 symbols or however many letters together, and you're spelling. So that's not a coincidence that they call that spelling. So this is leading to the book. Right, I'm starting to get all these things and on paper and rolling around in my head, and so I started to ask myself, well, okay, so what do I think? So who knows who Wendell Stevens was? Legendary UFO researcher. If you guys are into UFOs, you got to study some Wendell Stevens. There's one book he has, UFO Photo Archives. It's the best book that has all the best UFO photos in it from throughout history. It's incredible. But he also did some good work with abductees. And he came up with the first abductee profile that gave the psychological makeup of the early abductees and quote unquote the golden age of UFOs. And they were like God-fearing people. They were family people. They lived. They worked hard. Were honest. That kind of thing. It's got like 10 or 12 categories. Later on, we'll talk about Nadine Lalich came up with another abductee profile. It's got like 40 qualities. And I'll give you my theory on why there's so many more qualities a little later. But Wendell Stevens told me when he was in the Air Force, he was part of a crew that would film and document land from planes, like chronicling and graphing the different lands and mapping it. And they would always see UFOs heading towards the North Pole. And they were wondering like, well, why is that happening, right? And so that always stuck in the back of my mind. Then the next thing here is Alfred Bender's testimony, his book, UFOs and the Three Men. Anyone ever read that? No? Classic book in the field. I would recommend it. UFOs and the Three Men is about Alfred Bender's UFO group that discovers that UFOs are heading towards Antarctica. And when they were going to release that information, that's the first time that the Men in Black showed up. And they shut them down, right? That's a whole other story. It revolves around aliens and demons and what those beings really were, because there's a huge crossover between aliens and demons. And aliens and angels too, but in this case, it would be demons. It would be demonic if it wasn't alien. Brooks Agnew. Who knows about Brooks Agnew? The legend. He'll speak here one day because he's freaking awesome. He's the guy that has chronicled probably the most science that backs up the idea of a hollow earth. And the guy's just incredible. So if you don't know Brooks Agnew, he was the guy that's trying to put together an expedition to sail into the North Polar entrance. Right? So that's some cojones right there. Top Science is starting to confirm the possibility of a hollow earth. There's an Earth magazine article. There's a cover of the magazine right there. And then that article, they're talking about mountains being on the underside of the crust. And then you factor, you see a Brooks lecture, you factor in S&P waves, and S&P waves are showing there's this huge gap between the core, whatever that core might be, in our crust, and it might be liquid, but it's not solid. So just more evidence to maybe suggest that a hollow earth thing is real. No photographs above the 60th parallel, so they won't let planes fly over Antarctica or the North Pole directly, and they won't let them photograph it, and it's government stuff, right? So automatically they're lying. That would be my take, right? I mean, maybe you could trust them, but who would know when they're telling the truth or not? So you just kind of like, okay, we'll figure this out ourselves. There's a rich history of hollow earth tales from time immemorial. Like you saw, there's 16 stories. There's 5 times that are out there. Read the book Shambhala by Nicholas Roerich, and he talks about several of them. It's a great book. His story is absolutely fascinating. And so I just start to put this stuff together. The repetitive information from these stories implies that there's been a formal public relations campaign being perpetrated on surface dwellers by the hollow earth people to awaken the surface dwellers to the reality of a hollow earth. That was my original thesis. Since then, I've expanded that to this hierarchy of beings like I described before. It's not just hollow earth people, but they're working in legion and grouping with with the, ascended masters and spirits and some ETs, and, there's good guys and bad guys, basically, even though that's an oversimplification. But so let's break down the public relations campaign. So this is the adaptation phase. It's the first phase of the 3 in the public relations campaign. And what you're basically doing in this phase is if you're hired by somebody to represent you in the public, you're going to try to find out who they want to talk to. And then when you find out who they want to talk to, you want to find out who they are, what they like, what they dislike, what's going to maybe reach them more, what language do they speak, these kinds of things. That's called the adaptation phase. So I began to think, well, gosh, if the ETs have been here for tens of thousands of years, or if the Hollow Earth civilizations are what's given rise to the surf civilizations, and they've been here a lot longer than we have, they must know us better than we know ourselves. That's a full situation analysis. They know who they're talking to. So I'm like, oh my God, this is like kind of wild. So I started breaking down the other 5 categories. We're going to skip forward a little bit down to the end here. At the end of figuring out who you're going to talk to and what personality you're going to project to that person, to that group, to that public, you're going to formulate a clear problem opportunity statement so that your organization can move forward. So I'm thinking about, okay, well, what's the real issue here? Okay, humanity is going to destroy itself and not ascend, or humanity is going to ascend, right? This is the problem opportunity statement, and how would ETs or spirits or ascended masters or people from the Hollow Earth, how would they look at us right here, the experiment that's probably created by them? So I divided it into 2. The problem is humanity will destroy itself. The opportunity is to help or to exploit humanity in the process. And here we have the beginning of my discovery of the 2 different hierarchies that are competing, to one to help us to ascend and the other to maybe block us and start to feed off us. So as I'm putting the history of the Hollow Earth and UFOs on the right side, it matched up perfectly with the adaptation phase. Now we're in the strategy phase, and it matches up perfectly again. So you see, I broke it into 2 right there. You probably can't read it, but trust me, there's 2 columns right there on the right side. One's the help strategy, and then one's the exploit strategy. So of the 3 big categories in the strategy phase, the first category is formulate and select the best strategy that's going to fit you communicating to the target publics that you're trying to communicate with. So the help strategy guys, they're going to have peaceful but direct warnings, which is exactly what's happened in the golden age of UFOs. These guys would land and they'd pick people up that fit the Wendell Stevens abductee profile, and they would, like, honest, forthright people, and they would say, look, here's the situation. You guys are going to blow yourself up with nuclear bombs. You're killing the planet with pollution. We're going to give you a ride around and show you stuff, but here you got to go back and tell people about us, right? Try to change the situation. The Buck Nelson story. Anyone ever heard of the Buck Nelson story? They literally, supposedly Venusians came down, picked him up, said, okay, we're gonna show you the Moon, Mars, and Venus. That's the name of the book, The Moon, Mars, and Venus, or Buck Nelson's Incredible Journey to the Moon, Mars, and Venus. And in exchange, this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna expound the 12 laws of creation to your people as a way to help them, correct their ship. And it's a little tiny book, but totally famous. If you can get it. So that would be like the helpers trying to do that, right? The early contactee cases are all about this. Now the exploiters, they're still secretive, they're intrusive, they're harmful. I have a friend that gets abducted regularly in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, and she comes back with claw marks and scoop marks, and she's all sweaty and pale, and it's like, that's not good. That's not like God helping her out, right? That's something else going on right there. The other side does not care about our free will. And that's how you can tell the difference. If a being's in front of you and you ask it to leave, if it leaves, it's probably good because it's respecting your free will. If it doesn't leave and tries to give you some other sales pitch, that's a huge red flag. I know, Brian, you talked about discernment earlier. Oh, Brian's not there. Oh, look, I didn't discern he wasn't there. And so you have the next category in the strategy phase is segmented target public. So you want to divide up who you're talking to and maybe tweak the messages a little bit. Both sides use the same thing. Basically, world leaders, government, military, clergy, and then there's a little bit of a demarcation between the 2 abductee profiles, the early Wendell Stevens one, which was more simple, and the later one, Nadine Lawlich, which is much more complex. And my take on that is that the later abductions became more sinister, and they needed people that are more able to be manipulated. And I think the more complex individuals that have more issues, they're more easily manipulated. And so those kind of became the targeted issue later on, after the golden era, after the 50s, maybe into the 60s. Okay, so the last category here is implementation, and there's different ways to implement it, like the media, the obvious one. Performance tie-ins, like I just mentioned, Buck Nelson. UFOs would come down and pick people up and take them a ride, show them around, show them what's really possible, wake them up, and then send them back to Earth to say, hey, tell all your friends, kind of thing. Let's wake these people up. So that's a performance tie-in. VIP tie-ins. Anyone ever see Dan Aykroyd on the cover of UFO magazine? Okay, how about Hillary Clinton with that book in her hand, and they supposedly zoomed in and found out it was a UFO book? Okay, these kind of things that in the media are promoting one side or the other, but in general, waking people up kind of thing. Anniversary tie-ins, eclipses, the Mayan calendar, Olympics. There's been some great UFO sightings at the Olympics. Special events, Jimi Hendrix's Rainbow Bridge concert. If you get that video and look at it closely, at one point you can see a silver craft up in the sky that's on film. So they're showing up at these places. This is classic public relations, E.L. Bernays public relations. They're showing themselves at events where they know that people are already looking. And so it's just not a coincidence. Okay, here's the last phase, the evaluation phase. So there's about 40 or so evaluation techniques to evaluate your public relations campaign to see if it's working good. Most of them didn't fit the kind of way I was trying to apply this, but 2 of them did. One of them is pre-testing with response analysis. So the early UFO contactee cases were a way to test the response of qualified humans. They would make their presence known, they would explain the situation, and then they waited to see what would happen, right? So they're kind of probing at that point. And then how did humans perform? Well, contactees were publicly ridiculed, they were met with hostile resistance from world militaries, and the fear reaction from the public was generated, which still exists to this day. And this is something our friend Richard Boyland talks about, this fear and smear campaign that's been going on, like the aliens are these big boogeymen. So there may be some boogeymen, but a lot of the aliens really are not like that. It's just this programming, this specter that we're under of public relations. We've been driven into fear about these beings, especially Hollywood. Hollywood tends to do that to us in a lot of ways. But that last part is called post-testing with performance analysis. So we have response analysis and performance analysis to test how the campaign went. So based on what happened, this big fear response is coming. Whoever is perpetrating the campaign would have to reevaluate what their strategy is, okay? So the helpers are gonna back off from contact now because we're too skittish and we don't really know how to handle it. Our government's corrupt, so they're not gonna lead us justly. So they're gonna back off and respect our free will. The exploiters are like, heck yeah, pedal to the metal, let's keep doing this. This is exactly what we want. We wanna keep generating fear, and we want to control these people. We want to feed off of them. We want to maybe kill us, I don't know. There's a whole big population reduction thing that's going on right now. So I'm seeing all this, I'm starting to speculate now. What's next? Are they gonna let humanity die or intervene on behalf of humanity? That's what I think the helpers are gonna do. If it comes down to it, they're gonna wait and see what we do to the last second. If we can't handle our own business, which I think we should, have every hope that we could, they're gonna come and help. The exploiters are like, let them die. What do we care? We're gonna exploit them all the way down. If we can't keep them in a corral like we want and feed off them regularly, we're gonna let them die, right? And start over again. So my prediction is that there's gonna be, the exploiters will mimic the helpers, because that's what dark forces do, is take what the good forces do and then they distort it or mimic it. And they're gonna stage a special event, public relations, where it will look like UFOs and their occupants will intervene on behalf of humanity, but will only do so for further exploitation because that's just what they do, right? So I think they're gonna fake some kind of ascension. It's probably gonna be AI generated. That'd be my prediction. So that's basic public relations right there. How am I on time?
20 minutes.
Okay, wonderful, perfect. This is our little mischievous guy, Richard Shaver, right there in the right-hand corner. These are 4 famous, amazing stories covers, and what you see in the list right there are some of the Shaver oriented publications that came out after his death. the Shaver Mystery Magazine by Shaver and his wife, actually, and then Shavertron with by Richard Toronto. That's a great one. Hollowworth Hassle by Mary Martin and Tal Levesque, and they were associated with the Dulce-based saga. If you get my book, you'll see that's a whole big train wreck of information. But Mary and Tal Levesque were part of that, and it's associated with the Hollowworth. And of course, the late great DJ Crenshaw. They're all part of bringing this information forward because it's underappreciated in my view. It's underreported, and it needs to get out there. A lot of the UFOs we see are from the Earth, and I think that's a big secret, really, that hasn't gotten out. So in Shaver's vast story, and it's incredible stuff. I can't recommend digging into some of this stuff more. He was hearing messages from his welding machine in Michigan in the 1930s working in an auto plant. And he began to hear stories of the alternative history of Earth, that humanity is hundreds of thousands of years old, and that at a time in the distant past there was giants that walked the Earth. Some of the giants had conical heads, like this guy on the right there. That's supposedly what's known as a ptero. And they began to realize that the sun's energy was mutating the DNA on the surface. So they decided to go underground to use the crust as a shield so that they wouldn't be mutated. The Deros, the ones that oppose the Pteros, are these other neat little guys here with the little elephant trunks, and they're really slothful and hedonistic. And they stayed on the surface more, got mutated. So by the time they realized that, oh my God, something's happening, then they went underground. According to Shaver, there's just been this conflict between the Pteros and Deros underground ever since. So there's so many aspects of this story that strike a chord with me today about what's going on. Pteros and the Deros, we're looking at a separation of their society. Today we got Democrats and Republicans, and we're separated more now than we've ever been. Vaxxed, anti-vaxxed, there's all these different ways that are separating society. And so I look into the Shaver mystery like that, and I'm like, wow, this is really deep what he was onto. So if it was fiction, he was really like getting lucky, striking on all these things that would play out over time. But the Pteros and the Deros, their issue was the sun's radiation is mutating us. Some said no, some said yes. That created the separation. But I think maybe the most fascinating part about this, this guy invented medical equipment. He came up with a theory about immortality, that really the way we're dying because our cells are rusting. They're oxidizing. And so if you could stop the oxidation, we'd be immortal. And he says that's directly because the sun's rays have imbued those mutating vibes in the soil and the water. And I'm just totally fascinated by that. So this is the Manton language. Shaver talks about this. You guys probably can't see that from there. So I'll just say on the left column here is A through Z, and each letter represents an idea. So A, for example, means animal in the Manton language. G means to generate. P is for power. Pretty simple stuff, right? And scholars have kind of made fun of them and saying like, well, this is just make-believe stuff, right? And then, of course, I come in and I'm like, well, I don't listen to any authority, right? I got to figure this out for myself. I don't trust these guys, even though some of these guys are my friends, actually, that made that judgment. But so up on the right, you see the word Trocadero. And you see this word around the world. In San Francisco, there's two. There's a Trocadero Inn, and there's also the Trocadero Transfer nightclub, which was a gay nightclub. And I'm looking at these two locations. The Trocadero Inn, incidentally, was like a brothel. It was a gambling house in the late 1800s, and people were shot and killed there. So it's this kind of debaucherous stuff that I would later learn is what the Deros try to do to the Surface Society. They found caches of technology left by some of the Pteros, according to Shaver. The Pteros, in large parts, left the Earth because they knew they couldn't live underground forever. So the Deros are like, okay, great, now this is all ours now. So they go find these caches of technology. One general category of this is called stim rays, where they could shoot stim rays and like start wars or create peace or start disease or create health. Shaver, one of the reasons why he got kicked out of Amazing Stories magazine back then is because his stories are too graphic. And one of the things he would say was that the Deros would abduct human women and then shoot them with stim rays and get them all fired up sexually and have these giant massive orgies. And then they get tired, and then they just revive him with the stem rays. And so they're like, "You're out of here, buddy. It's 1950. We're not ready for that yet." So anyway, Trocadero was the word he gave as an example of how you could see man-tongue words in the English language still to this day. So Trocadero itself, it's a word as we look at it, but it's also a sentence. A T-row sees a D-row, or a good one sees a bad one. A taro sees a daro. That's Trocadero. It's a sentence. So I have two more examples right here. One is divisadero, and the first part is me just adding up the different letters to see what they mean. And then when you see what all the letters mean in conjunction with each other, my translation is the battle between the life force and the death force taking place within the body. Very profound. Turk is the same way. Life force plus U plus death force in large amount plus kinetic energy or energetic potential, which is what those four letters mean if you look at the little graph over here at the glossary or the key. My man-tongue to English translation is human potential to overcome death. Okay, that's going to become key here in just a second. So with that in mind, I'm asking myself, what is going on with Shaver? Is he a total crackpot? Was his wife right to put him in the nut house? He did get out, so supposedly professional people said, okay, you're okay enough. Or was he actually a genuine contactee who didn't have an outlet for his experiences? I mean, psychologists probably had a hard time listening to this stuff. So I think he packages stuff into fiction and sold it that way, and he could make a living and still, self-actualize and process all this stuff. It was kind of therapy for him to write. I'm a writer, so I can tell you writing is like great therapy. So I started to add up things as I was doing my research. So in some of the post-Shaver publications, there's a guy named Charles Marceau who's a proponent of Richard Shaver, and he would go around to different caves around the world and try to corroborate some of Shaver's stuff, right? Well, he made the comment that there was over 70,000 letters to the editors between Amazing Stories and some of the post-Shaver things of people that are claiming they've had experiences with the exact kind of beings that Shaver was describing, like Daros, being accosted by Daros, or Taros came and helped him in a dire situation. And so I study the law, and in common law, it takes two witnesses to convict somebody of murder. And so I'm thinking, well, okay, 70,000 letters, even if that was just 7,000 letters, that's pretty compelling to me. So 70,000 it opened my mind. I'm like, okay, there's something here, right? If you get into that post-Shaver material, there's people that say they were accosted by Daros in San Francisco. And I'm thinking, okay, San Francisco, okay. You guys ever been to San Francisco? Anyone ever? There's lots of Darrow names there, right? Including Divisadero, like I just mentioned, or Atascadero, Rascadero, Pescadero, Embarcadero, right? And so I'm like, okay, something's going on here. So I decided to, as I did in my first book, Song in Your Heart, The Story of the Search for the Lost Note, which is about the role of the roots reggae Rastas in terms of a global struggle for the control of human consciousness. That's over on the table. I decided to check other scholars' work with Bruce Cathy's Leyline mapping program. It's the only mapping program that I've ever heard of. Are you guys familiar with Bruce Cathy at all? Okay, he's a legend in the field. I would definitely recommend getting his books. That's one of them, called The Energy Grid right there. And what he did was he was following UFOs around New Zealand and began to map their movements, and he discovered they were mapping out a grid. So they're following a grid around the Earth. And there's various reasons why they might be doing that. But he was able to map the grid across the Earth. And all these lines were falling on sacred sites. As Brian discussed earlier, I see you over there. Sacred sites fall on these lines in a way that is not coincidental, that it just happens too much. Churches, cemeteries, stupas, they'll follow mountain ranges or tree groves or rivers. And you see this throughout different ley line theories, and some ley line theories contradict each other, but none of the theories have a computer mapping program that's based on what Bruce Cathy called light harmonic math. So I decided to use this technique, and I checked in my first book, I checked the Jordan Maxwell's theories about ley lines in Hollywood. I checked William Henry's theories about ley lines in Nashville. Stuart Swerdlow's theories about ley line crossing and vortex in Long Island, where Montauk is. And also Dr. Leonard Horowitz claimed back in 2003 that the original SARS virus was ritually created in the lab in Whitehorse, New Jersey. All of them had varying degrees of success when I mapped those locations with the ley line maps, but some of them were dead on. Like in Montauk, there's a crossing of the ley lines right at the tip, just like Swerdlow was saying. Are you guys familiar with the Montauk Project? Okay, Stuart Swerdlow, one of the last survivors of the original whistleblowers in Montauk. Great guy, full of information. William Henry's one wasn't as great in Nashville, kind of seemed to clash a little bit with Kathy's theories. But William Henry also talked about Mount Ida being sacred mountain that represents Mount Meru. And if you guys know your world history, your ancient history, Mount Meru is like the origin of the world. It's like a axis mundi, like all the things come from the North Pole and come down, and there's a big island or mountain up there. The East Indians talk about it. It's like an origin story. And so the early Americans, like they came over here. Brad was talking about Knights Templars coming over there. They're coming over here because they have occult information. And according to William Henry, Mount Ida was one of these mountains that represented Mount Meru to them. And so, boom, big line right down Mount Meru. Anyway, so I had some success in the first book, and I got full color maps in that book. Go check them out. So I decided to do the same thing with Richard Shaver. All right? So I threw down Grid B, which is what Bruce Cathy says is the most important one to pay attention to, over San Francisco. And there's 3 items marked out there. I don't know if you can see those, but Trocadero Inn is right here with all the debauchery that happened there. Here's the Trocadero Transfer, which is the gay nightclub. And then no ley line hits there, but you see right down the middle is the New Liberation Presbyterian Church. And so as we know from our ley line studies, ley lines commonly are found, churches are commonly found on ley lines, right? And so that was impressive enough for me, right? I'm like, wow, okay, that's pretty cool. So what street is that on? So I zoom in a little bit closer. Wait, we can't see that right here. Let's go one more. There we go. So it actually crosses the church. Here's the ley line, the yellow ley line coming down. It crosses this property right here. This is the New Liberation Presbyterian Church. It's on Divisadero Street. So it's a church on a ley line crossing a Darrow Street, Divisadero, like what Shaver was talking about. Those words can be broken down and expressed from man-tongue to English. So I'm pretty blown away by this, right? So I decided to take a friend, Brad and I's good friend Mike the Alien Human. We nicknamed him Alien because his name's Human, and we figured, well, if an alien was going to hide on Earth, what better way to hide than call himself Human as a last name, right? So he's Mike the Alien Human, great guy. We decided to go visit the church. So this is the sign outside the church. You see a stylized cross. The spirit, Christian interpretation would be the spirit of the dove. The dove is the spirit descending upon humanity, coming down metaphorically. But I'm looking at that and I'm going, well, God, it's in blue, and that could be water, right? So you got this little curve right here, like it's a whirlpool. If you guys study the East Indian traditions of Patala, the reptilians always like to guard the inner earth entrances with water. You know, they cover it with a pond or a river or behind a waterfall. That's just common throughout the lore of East India. So I'm thinking, okay, so that's kind of crazy. What if that was representative of the spirit trying to get down into the hollow earth? You see the flames like right here. And okay, on its own, I'm like, okay, I might be grasping at straws a little bit, right? So let's go inside the church. So me and Mike, we go inside the church, and we open the door, and about 20 heads turn around like this, because it was a black church, and we were 2 white guys, right? And they were kind of, I guess, a little shocked to see some white guys at the church, right? Turned out they were super really nice, but it was really a funny kind of moment, right? But so here's the stained glass behind the pulpit. All right, again, you see the dove, representative of the Spirit, Christian translation, coming down onto the sun, maybe representing the Son of God, maybe. You see the crown of thorns right here with the cross laid over the cross of it, and Jesus is king. So you got the crown of jewels there on the right. But I started looking at this and I started going, okay, let's look at it through a hollow earth lens. You got the Spirit coming down to the core, the central core, what in the story of the smoky god called the central sun, right? And how do you get there? You go through the cave marked by the ley lines, right there. And what happens? What's your reward for finding that? you get enlightenment, and there's the crown. So I just started interpreting it in this way, and I'm going like, wow, this is just, okay, on its own, maybe not, right? But things are starting to pile up. Here's another stained glass relief from there. That's supposedly Jesus, right? But he's got these dark, sinister eyes. And I'm thinking, wow, if this was a spot that marked a hollow earth entrance that maybe led to a Darrow lair, they could mark it today by having a sinister looking Jesus. Maybe I'm out of my head, right? But all these little things are starting to add up. So I start looking at the roof now. Again, there's the picture behind the pulpit. There's the pulpit down there. By the way, these guys, this black church, man, they jammed, man. They loved their music. This bass player was just getting down, and everyone was just clapping. It was a really great time, I got to tell you. But I started looking at the roof, right? Beautiful, ornate woodwork. Look at these glue lamps here, right? There's like 15 pieces of wood glued together here and shaped, and they get wider as it goes down. I'll show you another picture here. Right, you see the curves in those right there? Can you see those from that right there, kind of? And, I'm starting to think, God, that kind of looks familiar. I'm not really sure what that is. So we took a few more pictures. Here's another picture of the curves. Beautiful woodwork, okay? And I'm thinking, no, this couldn't be. It's like, what does that look like to you guys? Any ideas come to mind? It's an upside-down boat. Okay, that's the hull right there. And I'm like, this can't be, right? Why would that be, right? Here's another picture of it right there. Well, afterwards, I talked to the docent, Lucilia. And I'm like, so beautiful artwork, beautiful church. Thank you for having us, right? It was a really good time. And what's up with this woodwork? And she goes, oh, well, the architect created this concept that because Noah's Ark had been the savior of humanity in that story, that you would have church underneath an upside-down ark because that would be the safest place for humanity to worship. Okay, all right, sounded like plausible, right? I'd never heard of that before. For all the reading I've done, I'd never heard that before. So I immediately go home and I start digging through my books, and I found this. In his epic Chaldean Magic, that's the cover right there, by Francois Lenormand, 1877, he describes a curious tradition from the Chaldeans which inherited their culture from the preceding Akkadian Sumerians. So we're talking the origins of society, right? Modern society. Or at least that modern narrative. Again, it's a narrative, it's PR. But in part quoting from the Greek philosopher and historian Diodorus Siculus, Lenormand writes, the Chaldees have quite an opinion about their own about the shape of the earth. They imagine it to have the form of a boat turned upside down and to be hollow underneath. So this opinion remained to the last in the Chaldean sacerdotal schools. Their astronomers believed in it and tried, according to Diodorus, to support it by scientific arguments. It's a very ancient origin, a remnant of the ideas of a purely Akkadian period. And if we do not clearly understand this conception of the earth, that they believed the earth was hollow, that earth itself is an ark and the safe place for humanity, that we should find that all what the magical texts say about the form and economy of the universe perfectly unintelligible. So in other words, he's saying you have to look through that lens of the hollow earth to really understand what the ancients were thinking. And also their division of the principal parts of the universe under the dominion of different gods. And this is where we got to get into demons or other demigods or these kind of beings that are in traditions around the world. If you guys study the guidebooks to Shambhala, they're rife with stories of people that, we can get to Shambhala if we can defeat the demons on the way, or defeat the tests that the demons are putting for us. And this is all through Agartha, Patala. Many different, the Mayans have a rich history about this stuff too. So at this point, I'm pretty blown away, right? I'm like, wow, what was Shaver smoking back then? I don't know, but he seemed to be touching on some stuff here. So I start to add stuff up, as I like to do. So what do we have here? We have a ley line that crosses a Darrow Street. I think that's pretty incredible right there, because that refers to Shaver. Then the ley line touches the corner of a property of a church, which is common to ley lines, right? So it's like, oh man, this is like, can't make this stuff up. So to add that up, you have a church on a Darrow Street on a ley line. That's pretty powerful right there. Okay. Then you got the signs outside depicting the curious symbolism. Here's another rendition of it right there, with the dove like descending in what could be like a whirlpool. You have the triangle stained glass above and behind the pulpit. You have the dark-eyed Jesus. And now you got the upside-down Noah's Ark representative of the hollow earth, all in the same place. And I'm going like, wow, okay. So the next step, obviously, is to see if they'll let me down into the basement. Well, so far they haven't responded to my phone calls or my emails. So we're going to have to choose our words carefully and go and approach them to see if they would let us down into the basement, to see if there's any like walled up doors or anything, right? So that would be the next step. But so with that, I'm trying to answer the 3 questions that I started in the beginning. Was Shaver lying that his stories were true? Well, he got to 70,000 letters, right? Even if that's an overblown number, that's a lot of people that are corroborating his story from completely different walks of life. You got Shaver and Palmer. Palmer was his editor at Amazing Stories, and he would later go on to found a couple other magazines, including Fate magazine. You guys remember Fate magazine? That was Palmer. Okay, so Shaver and Palmer both going to their deathbeds without changing their story. That's compelling because if you study UFO stuff, you got government employees and military people that sign NDAs while they're in service, while their contract is alive, and they're not telling anything until their deathbed. And then they want to get stuff off their chest at their deathbed and they spill all the beans, right? No, I'm going to die tomorrow, so screw you guys, right? I love that. And now you got my ley line experiment findings. And so I'm adding those together and I'm like, look, it's probably not fiction. It was a bona fide Shaver contactee testimony published in the form of fiction because that's all he could do at the time. He was a writer. He needed to live. And so that's how I look at it. So I say he was not lying. I say he was like a closet genius, maybe before his time, one of those kind of people, right? And so here's a second question. Could the Shaver mystery be viewed as PR in line with the previously described campaign? So again, I like to add stuff up. It's a repeat of main themes throughout history. So that's a classic hallmark of a PR or advertising campaign. The inner earth cultures are the gatekeepers of the info. And I deduce this because it's been happening for thousands of years. The same information has been coming out, whether or not we have the modern media to bring it to us. But you can get into secret society stuff, and the secret society people are talking about this stuff and keeping it out of the public, right? So the only people that can control that information would be themselves, the people from the Hollow Earth. So they're gatekeepers. Gatekeeping is like a huge PR technique. I see the timing as reflective of a PR campaign because it was a timed release of info to coincide with the trend of sci-fi in the 1940s. That's what you do. You do performance tie-ins. You tie your messages to trends, and that helps carry the information far and wide. Classic E.L. Bernays stuff. So E.L. Bernays was the guy that got women to smoke in the war effort. So, because the men are out supposedly fighting the wars, and he wanted our country wanted the women in the factories making the bombs and the bullets to support the men, right? Well, part of that was smoking cigarettes. And so what did E.L. Bernays do is he hired a bunch of bohemian women from Greenwich Village to go smoke cigarettes at the Macy's Day Parade in an era where it was totally taboo. But look at the effect. There's millions of deaths. This guy's a hero, right? No. Anyway. So I'm looking at that. So I'm also looking at the Taros were educating Shaver through the welding machine like the Telosians were educating Diane Robbins, all right? And again, adding the stuff up. The usage of staged events, intentional messages through the welder, that's a staged event to directly target Shaver to convey certain information. That's classic PR or advertising. Then you got performance tie-ins. Shaver was captured and tortured and then shown around the underground like civilization and then released. I mean, just kind of like Buck Nelson, except I think they did some stuff to Shaver that we don't want to talk about. But he wrote about it. Got to give him credit. He was bold. And then so you have, I'm looking at this as Shaver was a PR agent for the Inner Earth people. So my conclusion is absolutely yes, his story is exemplary of this PR campaign that has been perpetrated upon surface societies for hundreds, if not thousands of years. All right, so last question. Who are the agents of ascension? We are the agents of ascension. So whether you're talking about the hollow earth or not, whether you're talking about UFOs or spirituality or corralling in your energy, as Brother Brian was talking about there, talking about ancient history, as Brad was talking about, we're all building towards this. We're learning more about ourselves. We're learning more about our communities and how to get along better without warring and cleaning our stuff up and getting rid of this nemesis that we've allowed into our lives and in our society called the cabal or the deep state, whatever you want to call it. It's ancient and it's tied to occult magic. But all this stuff, as we're trying to figure all this stuff out and help people by telling people, we are propagating the tenets of ascension and our own awakening. So we are the agents of ascension. So as I sit here today, I feel comforted knowing that there's such a group of people that are all following similar paths, even though we might look like we're studying different stuff. We're all studying stuff that revolves around the awakening of our consciousness and the empowering of ourselves and our families and friends and communities. So some final thoughts. PR was not invented on Earth by E.L. Bernays. How could it have been if these beings are using the same techniques, fitting up perfectly with our modern campaign structure on us, and they've been doing it for hundreds, if not thousands of years? PR was not invented on Earth, maybe inside the Earth. Again, take comfort in knowing that we're not alone in our struggle towards ascension. That's why we're all here, man. We're a family in one way or another, all of us, right? Doesn't matter what culture we're from, what our DNA is. We're all human beings, and we're here. We want to love, be loved, and spread that love, right? And if humanity plays its part, raises its vibration, stops warring, corruption, and pollution, I think big things are ahead for us. I try to hold hope in my heart that we're going to have success with this. It looks pretty dire right now. Things are getting really crazy, but just hold that heart-centered love, connect with your Creator, and if each of us does our own part, I think that collective is going to end up in the manifestation of this society that we desire. So with that, I want to thank you all for being here. Appreciate you. Have a good afternoon.